Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to plunge into fascinating sources and pull out those essential nuggets so you're instantly well-informed. Today we are taking a deep dive into Atomic Habits by James Clear, a really groundbreaking book. Our mission is simple. Get past the summary, find the really potent insights, the practical stuff for building good habits, and just as importantly, breaking the bad ones.
Oh.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's really get to the core of what makes lasting change possible.
Well, it's quite remarkable, actually, how Clear's own story sort of sets the stage for his whole philosophy. You see, he had this really severe baseball injury, a broken nose, I think. It nearly ended his athletic career. But instead of letting that define him, he rebuilt himself systematically. And it wasn't some huge overnight thing. It was all about these small daily habits he kept implementing day after day. It's kind of the living proof of the book's main idea. Big changes don't come from giant leaps. They come from tiny improvements compounding over time. It really shifts the focus to creating a system, rather than just chasing one big goal.
That origin story is so powerful because it really goes against what we often hear, doesn't it? That you need these massive, dramatic actions for big results. But what Clear really focuses on, and this is what I found so interesting, almost counterintuitive, is that idea from Chapter 1 about improving by just 1% every single day. Just 1%. It sounds almost too simple, right? But the math, when you look at it over time, is just profound.
Absolutely. It's like the compound interest of self-improvement. We get that with money, right?
Yeah.
A small percentage adds up hugely over years. It's exactly the same with habits. These tiny, consistent changes, they don't just add up, they multiply. A really great example he uses is the British cycling team. Yeah, they went from being pretty average to, well, Olympic champions. And how? Not by finding some magic fix, but by looking for tiny, tiny improvements in every single area. Bike seats, nutrition, even the pillows they slept on for optimal rest. Individually, none of those changes seem like a big deal, but put them all together, it completely changed the results.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how those small tweaks can lead to such massive shifts. And that sort of leads us into a deeper level he talks about in Chapter 2, the idea of focusing on outcomes, processes, and identity. Most of us think about outcomes, what we want to achieve, like, I want to lose weight. But Clear argues, really convincingly, I think, that the most effective way is identity-based habits, focusing on who you want to become.
Right. And that raises a really important question. How do you actually do that? How do you shift your self-perception? It's not just, positive thinking. It's deeper. So instead of saying, I want to run, you start thinking and believing, I am a runner. When you adopt that identity, the actions like grabbing your running shoes, they just feel like a natural part of who you are, not some chore you have to do. Your actions then reinforce the identity, and the identity drives more action. It's this powerful feedback loop.
Okay, so once you start leaning into that new identity, how do you actually build the new behaviors? Engineer them almost. Clear gives us this really fundamental framework, the four-step habit loop. You've got cue of craving, response, reward. Understanding that loop is just key. It's the foundation for designing habits that actually stick around.
Yeah, and what's really insightful is how much of this happens unconsciously. Below the surface, our brains are incredibly good at predicting things and automating responses. He even hints at examples like experienced nurses who can sense something's wrong with the patient before it's obvious. That's like a deeply ingrained habit of observation, almost subconscious. And this automation is efficient. It frees up our brain power, our conscious thought for the harder stuff. We're not constantly deciding every little thing.
Right? It reduces that cognitive load. And if you want to use that efficiency deliberately, for good habits. A really powerful tool he introduces is implementation intentions. Chapter 5, I think. This isn't just vague wishing like, I'll exercise more. It's about being super specific about when, where, and how. The formula is simple. I will behavior at time and location. So instead of I should meditate, it becomes I will meditate for 5 minutes at 7 a.m. in my bedroom. That specificity just cuts through the mental fog, makes it way easier to start.
Exactly. And something that often gets overlooked is how much our environment shapes our choices. Often, even more than willpower does. Chapter 6 stuff. You can have all the motivation in the world, but if your space isn't set up for success, you're basically swimming upstream. So the practical advice is design your surroundings, make the cues for good habits obvious and visible, and hide or remove the cues for bad habits. Like if you want to eat more fruit, don't bury it in the fridge drawer. Put a nice bowl right there on the counter. Easy to see, easy to grab.
Yeah, that ties directly into self-control, doesn't it? Chapter 7. It's not about having this bottomless pit of willpower, because let's be honest, that runs out. The smarter strategy for self-control is often just designing your environment to remove the temptation in the first place. Want to eat healthier? The single best thing might be just not buying junk food, don't keep it in the house, out of sight, out of mind, really works.
Spot on. And building on that, there's temptation bundling, chapter 8. This is quite clever. It's about pairing something you want to do with something you need to do, making the need to do habit more attractive. So, for example, maybe you love watching your favorite show on Netflix. You can make a rule. You only get to watch Netflix while you're on the treadmill or exercise bike. Suddenly, that workout doesn't seem like such a chore anymore because it's linked to something you really enjoy.
It's amazing how these different pieces start to connect. And it's not just about you and your immediate space, right? Clear also talks a lot about social influence, chapter 9. How much the people around us affect our habits. Apparently, we tend to imitate three groups: the close family and friends, the many like societal norms, and the powerful people we admire. So the key insight there is join groups where the behavior you want is already the norm. Makes it feel natural, like you're just fitting in.
And flipping that, when you look at bad habits, chapter 10 delves into finding their causes. Every bad habit has a trigger, a cue. If you want to break it, you need to figure out what that cue is and then, change it or avoid it. Interrupting that initial trigger is often where you regain control.
Okay, but what about just starting? That initial inertia can be tough. For anyone who finds it the hardest part, Clears has this brilliant little hack, the 2-minute rule. Chapters 11 and 13 touch on this. The idea is make any new habit take less than 2 minutes to start. The goal isn't to do the whole thing in 2 minutes, just the very beginning. Want to read more? Just read 1 page. That's it. Want to go for a run? Just put your running shoes on. Often, just showing up, just starting, is the biggest hurdle. This rule makes showing up incredibly easy.
And this connects beautifully to what he calls the law of least effort in chapter 12. We humans, we're kind of wired to take the easy way out. We prefer the path of least resistance. It's just natural. So if you want good habits to stick, you have to make them easier, reduce the friction. And for bad habits, do the opposite, increase the friction, make them harder to do. The guitar example is great. Want to practice more? Don't keep it packed away in its case in the back of the closet. Leave it out in the living room, ready to go. Reduce that friction.
And to really make sure those good habits happen, he talks about commitment devices in chapter 14. These are like ways you lock in your future behavior, making good habits almost unavoidable and bad ones really difficult. Think about setting up automatic savings transfers or bill payments. You decide once, and it just happens. That's a commitment device. Or maybe prepaying for a block of fitness classes. You've already spent the money, so you're much more likely to actually go.
Yeah.
It changes the calculation.
Right. Which leads us nicely into rewards, chapter 15, and what Clear calls the cardinal rule of behavior change. It's pretty simple. Behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated. Behavior that gets punished gets avoided. But the nuance here is the power of immediate rewards. Our brains love instant gratification. Long-term benefits are great, sure, but they often feel too far away. So finding ways to make a good habit feel satisfying right now, even in a small way, makes a huge difference in whether it sticks.
And a super effective way to get that immediate satisfaction: habit tracking. That's chapter 16. It works on a few levels. It's a visual cue, reminding you to do the habit. Plus, there's this real satisfaction in marking it off and seeing the streak grow and not wanting to break the chain, like just putting an X on a calendar each day you exercise. It seems simple, but that visual progress can be incredibly motivating.
Absolutely. And sometimes tracking alone isn't quite enough, especially when motivation dips. That's where having an accountability partner, or maybe even a formal habit contract, like he mentions in chapter 17, can be really powerful. Just knowing someone else is paying attention or that there's a consequence if you don't follow through, it adds a layer of social pressure or cost that can keep you on track.
Okay, so we've got identity cues, making it easy, making it satisfying. But what about natural ability? People might think, well, I'm just not wired for that.
Yeah.
Clear tackles the talent question head on in chapter 18. He basically says, yeah, genes matter. They might set the upper limits of your potential, but your habits are what determine how close you actually get to those limits. So the smart move is to choose habits that kind of align with your natural inclinations. Play to your strengths. Don't constantly fight your nature. Optimize your efforts.
And to keep making progress, to stay motivated long term, he brings up the Goldilocks rule in chapter 19. The idea is that motivation is highest when we're working on tasks that are just challenging enough. Not too easy, because that's boring, but not too hard, because that's frustrating and discouraging. You want tasks that are, right in that sweet spot, just manageable difficulty. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about constantly finding that edge, stretching yourself just enough to stay engaged and keep improving.
So it sounds like once you built these systems, use these rules, you're basically golden, right? Habits are automatic, life is good. Well, not so fast. Clear points out something really important in Chapter 20, kind of a hidden danger. The downside of good habits can be complacency. Once something becomes automatic, we stop paying close attention. We can hit a plateau and just stop improving. So he really stresses the need for deliberate practice. Even when a habit feels easy, you have to consciously push, refine, and look for ways to get better. Don't just go through the motions. So what does this all mean for us pulling it together?
Well, I think the ultimate takeaway, the core message running through Atomic Habits, is that real, lasting change is fundamentally about identity change. It's about building habits that consistently reinforce the kind of person you want to be. And that brings us back to the start. Focusing on systems, not just goals. Goals are fine for direction, but the systems are what actually get you there. By building good systems, refining them, and aligning them with your desired identity, you create results that last. And I think the book's real strength is how practical it is. Simple frameworks backed by psychology, very actionable steps, relatable stories. It just works.
Right. So as we wrap up this deep dive into atomic habits, let me leave you with a final thought to chew on, sort of building on that complacency idea. Given that even our best habits can lead us to plateau, what's one small identity shift you could start embracing today? Something small to kickstart a lasting change. And maybe more importantly, how will you make sure you keep practicing deliberately? How will you push beyond just automatic, even when that new habit feels totally normal? Really think about how the ideas from this deep dive into atomic habits could genuinely reshape your daily life and help you reach those bigger goals. Until next time, keep digging deeper.